So in spite of UBCM passing that resolution, what did the Premier say? Or what is the government position at this point?
Well, the government position is that even though they have consulted before with UBCM, that they are not prepared to engage. I believe Richard Neufeld had said they'd like to continue to consult with local governments, but the province does not intend to repeal Section 53.
Okay, so what does it tell you about democracy? And that means the majority of mayors and delegates from municipalities have said, no, we don't want it. But the government is still proceeding with it. What does it say about democracy?
Well, I guess we'll see what it says about democracy once UBCM goes back to consult with them with this resolution and see if they really are committed, as the Premier said just now, to working with local governments and with UBCM.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Marvin. Thank you very much. Thank you. You know, when we work together, we do get positive results. Now, if only we can get the City of Victoria to expedite your zoning application for Municipal House, we'd have one more thing to cheer about. Now, I realize that it's only been a year since we offered to donate the land, and things do take some time at City Hall. But wouldn't it be great if we could open Municipal House and celebrate it for the 2008 150th anniversary of the province of British Columbia right here in Victoria? I'm not sure if Mayor Lowe is here, but I've heard that he hasn't been here. He's been away this week, but I just wanted to say, I had to say that, right? We have to remember that Victoria is, by far, the best darn provincial capital that we've got in British Columbia.
Maybe Shane can tell us a little bit about what happened yesterday and Bill 30, how it was defeated.
Well, I think yesterday it was interesting. By almost a near unanimous vote, the delegates in this room rejected Bill 30, rejected the way that the government has imposed itself on municipalities, tore up their agreement with the UBCM, their protocol, tore up the principles of the community charter, and essentially said that that they no longer have a role to play in planning in their own communities. We saw that, and we've seen it reinforced today. On the issue of public-private partnerships, what we hear now is that it's no longer about the needs in community. It's about satisfying the ideological fervor of this Premier to privatize everything he can in government, capital and programs. That's his nature. He's prepared to do that at the expense of good planning, at the expense of good policy and programs. It's shocking, and it's tearing up the social contract in the province.
In November of 2004, the federal and provincial governments came together with $84 million for additional support for housing across the province. In December of that year, December of 2004, we announced there would be $27 million to help create 200 new units in what's called the Woodwards Project in Vancouver. That project will have construction started in 2007. The units will be ready in 2009. That's 5 years. Think of that. That is longer than it took us to fight 2 world wars and win them. And that's not good enough. It's not good enough for us. It's not good enough for the people that we're trying to serve. 5 years. In Prince George, we approved $4 million for supportive housing. We thought we had a piece of land available. Unfortunately, the land wasn't rezoned. So now there's $4 million sitting there wondering where its home will be, wondering what we can do with it. In Kelowna, in March of 2005, we announced $4.5 million for supportive housing. March 2005. We're hopeful that construction will start in 2007. We are hopeful that occupancy will be available in 2008. This is tough stuff. And for us to truly solve the problem, we all have to be part of lifting our way towards a solution. We will pay. We will invest. We will assure that there are resources there. But really, it is your part of the deal to make sure that we get the job done. All of these things, land costs, building costs, processing costs, and time, are working against what we all say we're for: affordable housing.
Well, I think, as I said, this really is about meeting his need around public-private partnerships, not around community need. And what we heard, we have to remember the Heartland strategy in British Columbia, where what we heard is this government announced the Heartland strategy for small communities. It was a hollow strategy, and he's re-announced it now in the Small Communities program. The other point that I'd make, and I found this one of the most outrageous things that we found from this speech, is that starting in 2001, this government, more than any in our history, has been ripping up the social contract in this province. They've been destroying housing, they've been undermining programs for our most vulnerable citizens, and then we heard the Premier today spend the first 20 or 25 minutes essentially chastising local governments for not doing enough to deal with those problems that he created. The reality is the government created those problems. The government needs to put the resources forward to solve them. They're not doing that, and he should look in the mirror if he wants to lay blame for the social problems in this province.
Last year, we doubled the funding for shelter allowance for elderly renters. The first time since 1990 that there's been any increase. We eliminated provincial income taxes for everyone earning under $15,500. That's helping seniors and renters on fixed incomes. People used to start paying income taxes at $10,000. So that's a pretty significant first step. We reduced provincial income taxes for people earning $30,000 a year or less by 37%. And 63% reduction was put in place for people under $20,000. So today, a typical senior couple earning $30,000 a year pays over $1,000 less for income tax alone. And everyone in BC earning up to $80,000 a year now has the lowest income tax rates in Canada.
The last year before this government was elected, last fiscal year, 2000 to 2001, ending in end of March 2001, surplus in the BC accounts of $1.5 billion. The first year of this government, deficit of $2.5 billion. Why? Because they cut the taxes. However, they promised that they would restore balance during the life of their first administration, and they did. They did it in spades. Big surpluses coming down the pipe now. So they kept their promise. Fair enough. How did they do it? Answer: they cut spending. Spending in BC between 2001 and 2005, spending on public government spending on all things, rose by about 6.5%. That's not enough to keep up with population growth and inflation. So in real terms, per capita, they actually cut public spending. They couldn't cut health spending, so they held it back compared to what people wanted, cut other things. Their revenues went up, if you include the federal transfers, their revenues went up about 28% over that 4-year period. So in 4 years, revenues up 28%, expenditures up 6.5%. Well, that's a pretty good way of producing a surplus, and they did produce a surplus. But my point is, they did it by radical cuts in public spending, necessitated, if you want a surplus, by the previous cuts in taxes. So it has been a transfer to taxpayers, and primarily to upper income taxpayers, paid for by cuts in public spending. And to pretend that this is going to go on into, in 2017 or 2020 or 2000 and whatever, this is, I think, not a good way to start a conversation.
We are